A very warm welcome to Sir Henry Fraser, his life in focus. I'm Sherwood McCaskey, thanks for joining us. We ended the last episode with Sir Henry recalling his mother's influence on his early education and his entry into the Lodge School. This week he begins by recalling the teachers he held in high regard.
Someone recently commented on the English teachers at Lodge School. I can really only think of two English teachers who ever taught me. One was in the very junior form, a lady who taught art for 1 year, and the physics teacher for a short while, a very short while. And then in sixth form there was a third who taught chemistry. But all of my other teachers were basically West Indians, Barbadians, who trained either at Cotterton College or at Mona. And most of them, in my eyes, were very admirable people. From what was called Prep A, I became a great admirer of a man called Val McComey. Val McComey taught French, and he made every one of us think that we were good. He had this amazing capacity to inspire us. He was a big guy. He spoke English and French fluently, and he taught us conversational French, which was terrific. But he was admired by everybody because he was a fantastic batsman. His performance on the cricket field when we had the Masters versus Boys cricket match every year, that was amazing. But Val was a character who inspired you. And it was a great pleasure to meet Val again when I was an intern in Barbados, and later on when he came back and retired here. And I was just sorry that I didn't see more of him. And he died, to my mind, rather prematurely in his 70s. But I would have liked to have, got to know him a great deal better in his own retirement. And then there was Graham Wilkes, and there's a wonderful story about Graham Wilkes. Graham Wilkes was a fantastic footballer, and he was also in the British Army in the Second World War. But he wanted to teach. And so although he had played for First Division clubs in Britain, he came to Barbados as a teacher. And it's said that in his first match for Lodge School, he kicked the ball so hard that he broke the arm of the goalkeeper. But Graham was a guy whose bellow across the playing fields could be heard from one end of the school to the other. He kicked the ball hard and low. He was a very, very serious taskmaster, and he trained the boys in athletics. And his two stars at athletics, well, I would say his three stars: David Simmons, the sprinter, Keith Ford, and Lolly Wedderburn, James Lolly Wedderburn. These were, got special attention from Graham and were extremely brilliant athletes. Lolly, as you know, went on to become our first Barbadian Olympiad and the Lodge School Olympiad. But Keith Ford was also superb. And in my years of wanting to be an athlete as well, I used to jog around the field with Keith Ford and then he would take off and leave me. But the point I'm making really about school is that these people were heroes to me because you never thought of really disagreeing with them or not obeying them. And I can list the people that I found heroic: Val McComey, top of the class; Graham Wilkes; Sir Alexander Hoyas, who was an amazing counsellor and who saved the lives, the careers, the prestige, the self-confidence of so many students who came from poor backgrounds and who were rebels by instinct. And he literally converted them and put them onto the straight and narrow. He was such a terrific counselor. So we would be doing an assignment and he'd be up at the desk over there, 10 feet away, whispering to this boy, or sometimes take them outside for a chat on the balcony. And Mr. Gooding, Mr. Herbert Watts Gooding, who guided us all to win Barbados scholarships, he was able to produce a Barbados scholar in biology successfully for about 6 years in a row. He was just an amazing teacher. And so I owe him a great deal as well. But it gave me a very strong feeling about heroes and people that you admire. Perhaps role model is the more accurate term, but heroes does apply as well because these people inspire you. And that made a big difference in my life. The influence of my heroic teachers and a few of my heroic friends in school. The senior boys like Lolly Wedderburn, Keith Hunt, and because because of my father's role and the role that he played with a lot of the people in the country, many Barbadians like Keith Hunt, the Jordan brothers, and so on, really looked after me at school and looked out for me. And that also made a difference in shaping my life and my career.
You may recall in a similar series, a fellow Lodge School alumnus described the institution as a special place that reflected the realities of a wider colonial Barbadian society divided along racial lines. Sir Henry Fraser gives his thoughts.
The racial composition at Lodge, well, it may have been different in the low forms when I first went to what it was in the upper forms. I'm not sure. I wouldn't have been a good enough analyst of what was going on then. But what I do know in the middle and senior school were the facts which more or less everybody knew. Lodge School had 350 boys in those days. We had the two preparatory forms and then two first, two second, two third, two fourth, two fifth, and a sixth form. And each form had between 25 and 30 boys. And of those 350, it was fairly well known that the boarding establishment was for the wealthy Bajans and West Indians. And the boarding establishment had accommodation for 90 boys, which is 1/4 of the school. Okay, so 1/4 were boarders. Of those boarders, a little more than half were local. And the local boys were almost all white, or what Sir Jack Leacock called whitish, or what Americans might call pass for white. Okay. The boys from the islands, on the other hand, they were of all complexions. We had Jewish boys, brown boys, light brown boys, dark brown boys from Guyana, from Dominica, from Antigua. That spectrum of boys from all over the Caribbean, as far down as Venezuela, had a huge impact on the development of Barbados. It had an impact on us as a school because we learned about all of our neighbors. We learned about life in Guyana. We were very unkind to our Guyanese friends, but we all got along exceedingly well. So that's the boarding establishment. The other 3/4 were day boys. And the day boys were, you could, I suppose, try to classify them. Of the day boys, literally half were white and half were black and brown. Okay? And the boys from the country, because of the nature of the distribution of ethnicity in Barbados, the boys from St. John, St. Philip, St. George, and St. Joseph, these were mostly black boys, many of whom became hugely distinguished, like Major Sam Headley, Sir Keith Hunt, the Jordan brothers, and so on. Whereas the boys who came from town and from maybe St. James and Christchurch, but mostly from town by car or by the school bus, were the well-to-do, mostly brown boys, boys like Mike Smith, the banker, and other well-known people. My father's friend, Mr. Scott of St. Philip, for example, his son, the surveyor, Anstey Scott, he came to Lodge. And a lot of the country boys cycled to school. Some came by bus. There was a huge population of boys out of Messiah Street. It was right next door to the school, so people felt, well, they should go to the Lodge. Then there were the boys who won what we call vestry scholarships from St. John and from St. Philip. So these tended to be the boys from the village who were not as well-to-do, for whom the scholarship was essential to get into a good school. And you will have heard, the story of Trevor Marshall, who was a vestry scholar, who went to Lodge School, and he's talked about that extensively. And although he felt he was somewhat victimized and bullied, both by the boys in his village who didn't get to go to Lodge School, and perhaps by some at Lodge, he still has a fantastic love for the Lodge. And I think that I may have been terribly naive as a small boy, but because of my upbringing and because I was friendly with everybody, I didn't have any sense of racial prejudice. I mean, my best friend throughout school until the 4th form was a boy called Tyrone Medford. Tyrone was a family of Bayesian Brown and Trinidad Brown. Tyrone was a little fairer than you. Tyrone was a little darker than my wife. My wife's complexion, and a handsome brown boy that I met at my first day of school. And Tyrone's mother was a friend of the family. And Tyrone simply came up to me and said, "You is Henry Fraser, you know. Miss Ina tell me to look out for you." And we bonded from day one, and we were best friends throughout school. Tyrone was a very handsome guy and a good actor, and we used to act together in plays. And our English master, Mr. David Pope, produced plays, and Tyrone and I were both keen on it. He then ended up, he was a guitarist as well, wonderful guitarist. He played music when he emigrated to London, and he worked with the Barbados Tourist Board for his entire career. So we meet when we're in London sometimes, and he remains a character with an amazing sense of humor. But what was interesting about Lodge was that with this situation in terms of Barbadian social prejudices and social stratification, there was at the Lodge, in my time, in my view, and in my understanding of life, complete harmony, because we admired the guys who were bright, who were good sportsmen. We all played together. If I was captain of the cricket team at one point, and I told John Brown, we'll go to mid-off, John Brown had no problem going to mid-off. And when he was captain, and I was not the captain, and he told me to go to mid-off, I'm fine with that. We worked really, really well and closely together, I was fortunate. I loved cricket. My passion was cricket. And I really wanted to be a good cricketer. And when I was taken to Kensington Oval at the age of 10, and I saw Clyde Walker, I saw this amazing stroke play. And the cover drive off the back foot was my stroke. So at one point we lived in a house with a staircase, an old plantation house that my father was forced to rent where the ash poured down. But I tied a ball on a string from the balustrade above, and I spent hours playing my cover drive off the back foot. But that was the thing about Lodge, that everybody was particularly friendly. But then people would have gone home to their respective houses, and there wasn't the social exchange when you went to Brighton or Plantation somewhere. It was a school which brought people together, and it was a school which brought people together from across the islands, and that had huge impact. And I think that Lodge School's role as a boarding establishment has never been fully appreciated, and it's very similar to the role of Covenant College. But let me move on then to something that I have to comment, which was not racial but perhaps racist. It's the distribution of the students when they got to sixth form. Somehow, the sixth form divided the school along racist lines. It was the brown and white boys who went into science, and the black boys who went into classics. Now, I've wondered about this and often thought about it. What was it that by the 1950s moved the boys from the country in particular? We had Neville Maxwell, we had Sir Keith Hunt, we had some of the Jordans, we had all sorts of boys from the country parts who simply went into classics. And they all did the three classic subjects: Latin, Greek, and ancient history. Now, I did Latin until fifth form, and I knew you needed Latin to become a doctor in those days. And Latin has helped me tremendously as a wordsmith. Latin, after all, is the source of so much of our English words. I didn't do French because I chose to do chemistry, but I also had some Greek in second form. So I did all of these things for science, while the boys who went into classics, I think, had to have been inspired by Sir Grantley Adams. Everybody knew Sir Grantley Adams was a classical scholar, won awards at Oxford for classics, and then went into law, and then became premier. So we were not yet independent, but this great man, Moses, the most Barbadians, was a classical scholar and then a lawyer. And it was as if the guys who wanted to go into politics gravitated to classics. And then many of them went on to do law. David Simmons, another example, classics and then law. Whereas my friends, J.A. Ford, and myself, and Mike Smith, and all the other, and the white guys from the plantations who wanted to do engineering, or us who wanted to do science, Rex Jordan and Oscar Jordan. Now, Rex did science. Rex and Oscar both wanted to be doctors, but Oscar knew he was good at classics. So Oscar did classics and apparently made history in the Oxford and Cambridge exams by getting 100% in Latin prose. And this was a big thing when the headmaster announced this. So Oscar was brilliant. He did classics, and he very quickly transferred to science, spent a year here while waiting to effect his scholarship, doing science and getting into science for medicine. So George Arlene did classics and then went into medicine. So Kenneth Stewart did classics and then went into medicine. And these became the two greatest doctors from Barbados, Sir George Arlene and Sir Ken Stewart, classical scholars, you know. It was amazing how the liking for classics and for languages directed people in that direction. While all of us who wanted to be doctors, and Rex Jordan was an exception. Rex was Oscar's youngest brother. He wanted to be a doctor, and he had done science, so that when I was in the junior scientifics, he was just ahead of me. And so people like Rex Jordan, they determined my going to the University of the West Indies. Let me explain how I came to win a Barbados scholarship. When I was 8 years old and about to enter Lodge School, my father's former boss, the manager of Lemon Arbor Factory, now Uplands, was a man called Bert Cheeseman. Mr. Cheeseman had 2 sons, and his son Francis won the Barbados scholarship when there were 5 of them in 1952. I was 8, Francis was 18. And so Francis and his father came to visit our house for Francis to say goodbye and off to Cambridge. And Barbadian scholars went to Cambridge. So Francis went off, and his father said to me, "Right, Henry, you've got to win a Barbados scholarship too." And my father drilled that into me, that if Francis could win a scholarship, then I could win a scholarship, and it would be the only way I would ever go to a university. So I was programmed to win a scholarship from the time I went to school. And I was lucky, and I worked hard, so I manifested the Gladwell principle. I had the opportunity of Lodge School when there were only 350 boys going there. And I took that opportunity with passion, and I came first in class throughout school. Now, when it came time to take the scholarship exams, we had in those days a University of the West Indies scholarship exam. And you took that exam, interestingly, in January. And so in January of 1962, I took the University of the West Indies exam. And what it comprised was to write a thoughtful essay on one of 5 subjects. And one of the subjects, which was very topical, was, should the West Indies Federation be dissolved? Now, you will recall that the decision to dissolve the West Indies Federation was taken in the winter of 1961. So people already knew that that was the plan to break it up, and it was broken up finally in April. So I was writing this essay in January with the passion of a young, committed West Indian who felt the Federation should not be dissolved. And I obviously had studied the matter. I had been reading the political reports and so on, and I had a view, and I obviously wrote a passionate essay, and so I won a University of the West Indies scholarship to go to UWI in Jamaica. Well, I had also been very busy playing lawn tennis and playing in plays and doing all sorts of things, even painting, and really not studying very hard after I won that University College of the West Indies, it was then, that scholarship. And to top it all, we had a games master, Mr. John Ludwig, out of Britain, who believed in what he called an outward bound experience for schoolboys. And he announced just before the end of the Hillary term, the Easter term, that he was renting a yacht and he was going to take 30 law school boys on the yacht with a couple of masters up the islands across the Lesser Antilles as soon as the summer term ended. And in order to do that, we had to pay a contribution of $85. Now, it doesn't sound like much, and he must have paid a lot more to rent it. But 30 boys at $85, you can work that out. It's only a couple of $1,000 in all. But how were we going to find $85? My parents had a hard time making ends meet with 4 children. And I'd already won a Pilgrim Scholarship, which saved them some money. But how was I going to find $85? We were not kids who had a generous pocket money. So what was I going to do? I had to do what the unemployed people are doing around Barbados. And every time I go down the road and I see somebody selling coconuts, or I see somebody selling soft drinks, or I see somebody roasting corn, I am reminded of the Easter vacation of 1962 when I became an entrepreneur. It was the only thing I could do. When you're out of work and you need money, you turn to being a salesman. So I would borrow my father's car on a Saturday morning, and I would go into Bridgetown and I would load up the car with several cartons of household goods. And I lobbied my parents' friends and all of our neighbors so that they would buy from me tomato ketchup and soap and cleanser and toilet paper and all of these things, which I'd fill my car up with on a Saturday morning. And I'd spend the weekend, and if necessary, Monday or Tuesday nights, driving around the neighborhood selling goods. Now, in those days, everything cost just a few cents. But I made $100 and something, so that I not only paid Mr. Ludwig his $85, but I was able to buy a new tennis racket. So that was great. And we went off on this amazing trip up the islands as far north as St. Kitts. And we were hosted by lodge school boys and their families across the islands. St. Vincent, St. Kitts, everywhere we went, Antigua, we were feted by these families whose kids had come to Barbados to school. And I make that point because Cottingham College did a similar thing for the Caribbean. Cottingham College produced teachers, administrators, and priests who went across the Caribbean. When I went to Jamaica in 1962, most of my school, my university colleagues and classmates, they'd been taught by Barbadian teachers who had gone to Jamaica, emigrated there, and were part of the Jamaica teaching force. It was amazing the connections that we established through Cottingham College, and then through Lodge School, and then through the University of the West Indies itself, which brought the Caribbean together. And it was a pity that it hadn't existed a bit longer before the Federation broke up. But that was how I was preparing for the Barbados Scholarship, by being an entrepreneur, being a salesman in my spare time, and not studying hard enough. So I was very happy to go to UWI. You see, I was inspired to go to UWI by the fact that my older friends, Rex Jordan, Oscar's brother, Dr. Michael Hoyas, Carl Messiah, these guys had gone off to UWI to do medicine. And when they came home in the summer, I met them and they told me what it was like. And they told me all about it. And then I had a teacher, a Mr. Victor Matthews, who had gone to Jamaica. And he taught us maths, and he thought it was absolutely wonderful in Jamaica. So I had had this experience of being taught by West Indian teachers. There were hardly any English teachers at Lodge School, 2 or 3 perhaps, but the rest of them were people like A.R.V. Newsom, the headmaster, Mr. Critchlow in Latin, Mr. Walcott in Latin, Sir Alexander Hoyas, then known as Fab. Fab was the history teacher, the same Victor Matthews, the scripture teacher. They were all West Indians. I hardly had an English teacher of any kind. So I couldn't go to Cottingham College because they didn't do medicine, although that was the wish of the benefactor. And it was the Cottingham College will, Christopher Cottingham's will, establishing Cottingham College, that made a big difference to me, because I had learned all about him and his life and his will and his wish. And that was what helped me to turn towards medicine as a career, because that was something I really felt was a form of love and a form of service to humanity. And I couldn't go to Cardigan College to do it, so I wanted to go to UWI. So having established that I was West Indian who wanted to be a West Indian and who wanted to go to Jamaica, I really wasn't worried about the Barbados Scholarship. When I won it, it was quite a surprise, and that carries a nice story, because the headmaster, Mr. Newsom, called the home on a Saturday morning after the decision had been made. There were only 4 Barbados scholars that year, and Lodge School swept the board. A cousin of mine, Barry Drayton, came first in mathematics. My very good friend, Paddy Roach, who went on to do chemistry, he came second. I came third in biology. And the fourth was Peter Laurie in humanities, languages. And it was just the 4 of us. And he called to say I'd won it, and he said, I will call Cambridge University on Monday morning to get you in there. And I said, but sir, I'm not going to Cambridge. I'm going to the University of the West Indies. And he said, in the way that Mr. Newsom used to say, with great authority, nonsense, Fraser, nonsense. You must go to Cambridge. All Barbados scholars go to Cambridge. And he was largely true, but it wasn't my choice. And he said, tell your father to call me when he comes home and get him to put some sense into your head. But luckily my father appreciated my point of view. So I went to the UWI and never regretted it for a moment. It was a fantastic choice, fantastic decision, and one of the best periods of my life.
A committed West Indian inspired by his fellow West Indian heroes and a proud alumnus of the University of the West Indies. This has been Sir Henry Fraser, his life in focus. I'm Sherwood McCaskey.